Right now on Hoosier News Source, we catch a glimpse inside IU's COVID labs and a look at how local businesses are enforcing and not enforcing COVID regulations. Stay tuned to find out.
And I have warmer temperatures as well as the IU men's basketball game day forecast. Hoosier News Source starts now.
Hello, and welcome to Hoosier News Source. I'm Callie Lichter. We start today's episode with the latest COVID-19 updates. Hoosier News Source reporter Andrew Lamparski is in downtown Bloomington with new numbers. Andrew?
Thanks, Callie. In terms of positivity, we're at about the same place we were at last week. 0.17% of the roughly 20,000 mitigation tests taken were positive. There were less tests taken than the week before, likely because of the weather last week keeping people from getting to their tests. Greek housing positivity is up to 0.7% this week, while residence halls dropped to 0.1% along with off-campus housing. While COVID rates are low on campus and in Monroe County compared to last month, it seems that some people are letting their guard down. After we found some social media video of large crowds of people not social distancing or wearing masks in a downtown bar, we decided to look into enforcement rules ourselves. Signs like these line the streets of downtown Bloomington. And while the rules are posted on doors, they're not always enforced. Take this cell phone video captured just over a week ago at the Bluebird Bar, for example. Few masks in sight and almost no social distancing. It's a phenomenon that Monroe County Health Administrator Penny Caudle says is a real problem.
We are concerned anytime that we see people not complying with the regulations, and it is on the business to bring their patrons into compliance, but it is also an individual responsibility for each of us to be complying with those regulations.
Under current regulations, businesses in Monroe County are required to enforce masking and social distancing. But how easy is that in a college town? Nick's English Hut General Manager Pete Michaelitis says it often requires gentle reminders by staff members.
This is still a bar and restaurant, and as such, it's a social gathering, and so people tend to want to mingle and do things that are against regulations for the health board.
Certainly, people have told us that it is a challenge for them. It is difficult, and one of the reasons that we put in that earlier close time was related to that, right? The longer that people are there, the more non-compliance that we tend to see.
And while cases continue to fall in Monroe County and across the country, these signs will be up for a while longer. Caudle says it's important for people to keep their mask on and their guard up. We reached out to the Bluebird Bar several times to get their perspective on the videos and the Monroe County regulations, but we haven't heard anything back. The Monroe County Health Department didn't want to comment specifically on those videos while they continue to look into them. And that's all for this week's Campus COVID Update. For Hoosier News Source, I'm Andrew Lamparski.
Thanks, Andrew. Have you already been vaccinated for COVID? According to the World Health Organization, 63.1 million Americans have received the COVID vaccine, which includes 1.3 million Hoosiers. Experts are unsure if vaccinated people can carry the virus. It takes around 2 weeks to build immunity, so someone who is vaccinated is still at risk for contracting the virus. The CDC urges people who are vaccinated to still wear masks, social distance, and take precautions. IU says that they will be following CDC guidelines.
Believe it's yes. I mean, we tried very hard to focus on what the CDC is doing, and so we will likely be taking this into advisement. We should be honest, though. It just doesn't affect our constituents that much at this point because most of our constituents have not yet been vaccinated.
Even though the vaccine is being rolled out in stages, President Biden says that the vaccine will be available to all Americans by the end of July. After receiving your weekly mitigation test, do you know what happens between leaving the testing center and receiving your results? Hoosier News Source reporter Elizabeth DeSantis gives us an exclusive look inside IU's COVID testing lab.
IU has processed over 220,000 COVID-19 mitigation tests in its on-campus lab since October. Using a team of robots and 10 workers, the clinically certified laboratory continues to analyze between 2,000 and 3,000 samples a day, using a method adapted from the University of Illinois. IU Chief Scientific Officer Dr. Craig Picard explains what happens to your sample after you leave the testing center.
With the 95-degree incubators, that cooks the virus, which has a lipid envelope or fatty outer layer studded with proteins, and the heat makes the proteins fall apart. And now the step that we're looking at now with the robots, it's distributing detergent solution in to mix with the virus, and that's going to take apart the fatty stuff. So at that point, the virus is released from the viral genome, the RNA is now liberated out of the virus, so it's ready for testing at that point.
Samples are then analyzed in PCR machines for 3 proteins associated with the virus.
We find out whether the virus is detected or not detected, and then we report that on. We have a big software system for all of this stuff. Once we push the button to release those results, they go out to both notify the students and also the contact tracers.
For Hoosier News Source, I'm Elizabeth DeSantis.
For further questions about IU's mitigation testing, visit the weekly webinar Ask Aaron, which airs every Wednesday at noon. President McRobbie just announced some very exciting news for both 2020 and 2021 IU graduates. On Monday, he announced that IU is planning on hosting an in-person outdoor commencement ceremony in May. This will apply to all 2020 and 2021 undergrad and grad students from all IU campuses. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, only graduates will be attending the ceremony in person. Family and friends can attend the ceremony virtually. The ceremony for graduate students is Friday, May 7th, while the undergraduate commencement is set for Saturday, May 8th. Plans are subject to change, but current information can be found on IU's commencement website. Coming up on Hoosier News Source, we hear the latest on President McRobbie's replacement, and Caroline Clare joins us with this week's forecast. Welcome back to Hoosier News Source. Caroline Clare has the latest on this week's warmer weather. Caroline?
Thanks, Callie. Before we get into the warmer weather, let's take a look back at the record-breaking cold that affected thousands last week. Many cities in the central U.S. reaching record cold temperatures. This image represents the daily mean temperature anomaly for this February. Many areas in the central U.S. averaging over 16 degrees colder than normal for this time of year. Pierre, Iowa showed a 77-degree increase in less than a week. Thankfully, we will be receiving a relief from these cold temperatures this week. Let's take a look at our forecast for the IU men's basketball game against Michigan this Saturday. Game time at noon, but before the game we have 45 and going into the 50s throughout the day. It's going to be a really nice day. Just a small chance of rain throughout the day, but you can tune in on Fox Sports at noon. Now let's take a look at what to expect for the rest of the week here in Bloomington. Overall, we're getting really warm temperatures to end off this week. Some rain chances on Wednesday. And as we go into the weekend, a beautiful weekend, make sure to get outside this weekend if you can. And going into early next week, some returning rain chances and even some possible rain-snow mix here as we go into next week with temperatures dropping below the freezing line. Take advantage of this warmer week and make sure to cheer on the Hoosiers this Saturday. Callie, back to you.
The dramatic snowfall led to frustration for Hoosiers who park on the streets. On Monday and Tuesday, Hoosiers were snowed in. For those who park on the streets and parking zones, their options were limited. The streets were poorly plowed, and if they were, it forced the snow onto the side of the road where people are supposed to park. The spots were not clear, covered in snow, and dangerous. With this, parking enforcement was lenient.
The snow does get plowed, and the first go around they plow up against the meters. And so that makes difficulty not only for patrons to pay, but for us to enforce those meters and to collect from those meters.
The Indiana University Board of Trustees is continuing the search for President McRobbie's replacement. On February 5th, the board met to discuss the latest updates in the search. Search Committee Chair Melanie Walker says diversity is a main focus within the candidate pool and their achievements. The committee is asking prospective candidates about how they plan to resolve equity-related issues and their strategies to make IU's faculty, graduate students, and administrators more diverse. A list of finalists will not be announced in order to maintain confidentiality, covering candidates who currently serve at other institutions. IU Business Club, the collegiate entrepreneur organization, and the IU School of Education collaborated on Monday night for an idea competition to showcase the importance of creativity within both fields. The event included a guest speaker as well as a competition between participants. Members from both organizations split into groups. They then had 20 minutes to answer a range of questions regarding online school innovations. Their goal was to incorporate aspects from both the business side and educational side of online learning to create a vision for a more collaborative and creative environment. The ultimate goal of the contest was to incentivize creativity and highlight the similarities between business and education.
They really do both involve so much innovation, and that's where the phrase idea competition just totally sums that up, I think, in a perfect sense.
Jackson Kinney joins us with the latest on IU sports. Jackson?
Thanks, Callie. The men's and women's team were both in action over the last week. The men's team split a pair of home games first by defeating the Minnesota Golden Gophers last Wednesday, 82-72. Led by Trace Jackson Davis and Al Durham, the Hoosiers were able to pull away and seal the victory after trailing at the half. And then on Saturday, they took on the Michigan State Spartans, where they led by 4 at the half, but could not finish the Spartans off, letting them come back to defeat the Hoosiers 78-71. The women's team only played once over the last week, but it was a huge game for Terry Morin's squad. The Hoosiers faced off against the 11th-ranked Michigan Wolverines in Assembly Hall. Led by veterans Allie Patberg and Grace Berger, the Hoosiers put Michigan away to win 70-65. With the win, the women's team steals the number 11 spot in the national rankings. Both teams will be in action multiple times over the next week. The men's team will travel to Rutgers on Wednesday the 24th before returning home to face Michigan on Saturday the 27th, with each game being considered must-win. The women's squad hits the road for the next 2 games to face Wisconsin on the 24th and then the Ohio State Buckeyes on the 27th. For more in-depth coverage on all of IU sports, be sure to check out IUS TV's own Hoosier Sports Night each Friday. Callie, back to you.
Thanks, Jackson, and thank you for watching this week's episode of Hoosier News Source. To learn more about this week's stories, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at IUS TV News. I'm Callie Lichter. From Bloomington, Indiana. We'll see you next time.